Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, September 16th, 2024. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today: suspect in Trump plot recruited for Ukraine's Foreign Legion. So I'm recording this on Sunday night, and there's still details coming out, but it does look like someone else tried to, or would have tried to, assassinate Donald Trump. So this suspect who was arrested, his name is Ryan Ruth. He's 58 years old. Apparently, the Secret Service saw him sticking a gun, an AK-47, through a chain link fence while Trump was playing golf on his course in West Palm Beach, Florida. He was in the hole, either the next hole or two holes ahead of Trump, standing there pointing his rifle through the chain link fence, and Secret Service fired on him. Not clear if he got off any shots, if he, fired back at all, but he fled, and then they ended up getting his license plate from a witness, and they found him and they arrested him. So he's alive, this guy, and he has some interesting background, to say the least. So this article's from Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone. Before he was caught with an AK-47 on a golf course near Trump, Ryan Ruth went to Kiev to fight for Ukraine's military and recruit for its international legion. Ruth told U.S. media that he had partners meeting with the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So Ryan Ruth was arrested with an AK-47 style rifle several hundred yards from Donald Trump while the former president was golfing. And this is being investigated as a potential assassination attempt, according to the reports Sunday night. So back in 2022, Ruth reportedly traveled to Ukraine to recruit for the International Legion. According to Newsweek Romania, which interviewed Ruth in 2022, the American resident of Hawaii hoped to fight as a volunteer alongside the Ukrainian army, but was too old at 56. He said, quote, "So plan B was to come to Kiev and promote the idea of many others coming to join the International Legion. We need thousands of people here to fight alongside Ukrainians. There are about 190 countries on our planet, and if the governments are not officially sending soldiers here, then we civilians should pick up this torch and make it happen," end quote. And there's a video here, and in the beginning, they say, "Why are you here?" He says, this conflict is so black and white. It's good versus evil," just kind of like a very childlike understanding of the war, saying it's like a storybook or like a movie. So that's kind of his attitude. And then his Twitter timeline is filled with scores of tweets volunteering his direct assistance to the war in Ukraine, cheerleading the war against Russia, and attacking opponents of military aid to Kiev, such as Tulsi Gabbard. So here's just one tweet. This is from March 15th, 2022, and he wrote, quote, "I am willing to fly to Krakow and go to the border of Ukraine to volunteer and fight and die. Will I be able to cross the border to fight without a visa? Every citizen around the globe should be running to Ukraine to fight. Can I be the example? We must win," end quote. And they suspended his Twitter account. I wanted to, for the show, just scroll through some of his tweets, but they got rid of it. But I was looking through it, and actually his first tweet, the first thing on his timeline, it was from 2023, and he said something like, "I have hundreds," or maybe he even said thousands, of Afghan soldiers who could be deployed to Haiti as part of an international police force. And apparently Semaphore interviewed him. I believe this was in 2023. Yes, and yeah, so this story from Semaphore: Ukraine is turning down hundreds of Afghan soldiers who want to join its war effort. So he's saying in this interview that he's got all these Afghan soldiers who are eager to go fight in Ukraine, but Ukraine's not letting them for whatever reason. He told them, quote, "I have had partners meeting with Ukraine's Ministry of Defense every week and still have not been able to get them to agree to issue one single visa," end quote. So claiming that his people were meeting with the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Just a very strange, kind of bizarre guy. Because again, like, he's doing all this stuff publicly, kind of saying all these crazy things about recruiting people to fight in Ukraine, and also Taiwan. He's saying he wanted to try to get Taiwan to form some sort of foreign international legion. That was in his tweets as well. And he also appeared in a March 25th, 2023 New York Times article about the U.S. volunteers in Ukraine who lie, waste, and bicker. And this, I remember, I think we ran this story at antiwar.com. It was about some of the Americans who were volunteering in Ukraine. And a lot of them were just kind of, wasting everybody's time. And one of them was Malcolm Nance that they mentioned. But so Ruth is mentioned in this, and he says a few things, that he was planning to move volunteers, in some cases illegally, from Pakistan and Iran to Ukraine. He said that dozens had expressed interest. He said, quote, "We can probably purchase some passports through Pakistan since it's such a corrupt country," end quote. And apparently his background was he had a construction company. He had a criminal record. He was arrested many times, including in 2002. He was charged with possession of weapons of mass destruction. He had a weapon of mass destruction. Apparently it was a machine gun. Interesting that they used that term. I guess in 2002, that's what everybody was talking about. So they did find the WMDs, but it was this guy that had them, not Saddam. So again, just a very strange story. So right now, I think we could, think that the motive here could be related to Ukraine. I mean, again, if you look at his social media, now it's gone, but that's what it was all about, was Ukraine. And again, he mentioned Taiwan and things, but all this stuff, very, very passionate about Ukraine. It's just kind of a bizarre thing. And I think that the kind of Ukraine aspect of it, they might try to kind of brush it aside in kind of the mainstream coverage of what's happening here. But we'll see how it plays out. Again, he's alive. Judging by the way he carried himself, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to make some statements about why he did what he did or what he was doing there. We'll see. He might, try to get off or something, plead, say that he wasn't trying to kill Trump. We'll see, how this all plays out. All right, so the next one here, no word on long-range strikes on Russia. So Ukraine is still pushing for the U.S. to support long-range strikes inside Russian territory after a meeting between President Biden and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer ended with no announcements about the issue. So Biden and Starmer held talks at the White House on Friday, a day after Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that if the U.S. allowed and supported long-range strikes inside Russia, it would mean that NATO is at war with Russia. So ahead of the meeting, the White House said that the U.S. has not changed its policy regarding long-range strikes. This is John Kirby. He said, quote, "There is no change to our view on the provision of long-range strike capabilities for Ukraine to use inside Russia. I would not expect any major announcement in that regard," end quote. You see this picture here. Biden looks a little tired at this meeting with Starmer. The UK wants the US to sign off on Ukraine's use of British-provided Storm Shadow missiles, which have a range of about 155 miles inside Russian territory. But there's no sign that Biden gave that permission. The New York Times had a report making it seem like the UK is kind of pushing for this, while the US is a little more concerned about escalation. We're seeing more members of NATO express support for this idea, so we'll see how this, how this shakes out. On Saturday, Rob Bauer, who's a admiral, he's a Dutch admiral, and the chair of NATO's military committee, he expressed support for supporting the long-range strikes. And so, as I covered last week, in the days leading up to this meeting, there was a lot of reports saying that Biden was ready to lift the restrictions on Ukraine's use of long-range weapons. Some of those reports said that he would do it just for the British Storm Shadow missiles and not any American weapons. Other reports said he was going to do it for everything. But there was the Guardian report. A lot of people are saying, oh, the U.S. and the U.K., they're backing down. They're not going to do it. Putin scared them off with his warning. But there was also this report from the Guardian last week, if you remember, that said that a decision has been made in private by the U.S. and the U.K. to allow the long-range strikes, but that they didn't plan to announce it. They weren't going to make it public right away, and that it actually said they weren't going to announce anything after this meeting. And looking back on the escalations in this war, they usually don't come out and announce things like this. Back in May, that was when Biden first gave Ukraine the green light to use U.S. weapons in strikes across the border, in Russian border regions. There was no announcement. We learned that from Politico, I think, first reported it and said it's official. Biden gives Ukraine the go-ahead to use U.S. weapons across the border. And then, eventually the U.S. kind of acknowledged it. Although, if I remember it right, they kind of said, yeah, our position hasn't changed. We support their right to self-defense, and these strikes are consistent with that. They kind of pretend like they didn't really do anything. So I think, they know that if they come out and announce this, then, Russia, there's going to be more pressure on Russia to respond. But if Ukrainian, if these American and British missiles all of a sudden start hitting targets deeper inside Russia, I wouldn't be surprised. But we'll see what happens in this next week. All right, the next one here. Zelensky complains that the West won't shoot down Russian missiles. So Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky complained on Friday that his Western backers won't shoot down Russian missiles and drones over Ukraine, which would mean direct NATO involvement in the war. Zelensky said, quote, "If the Allies shoot down missiles together in the sky of the Middle East, why is there still no decision to shoot down drones and missiles over Ukraine, even when those drones fly toward the EU," end quote. So if you remember back in April when the U.S. did intervene directly to defend Israel from Iran when they fired the missiles and drones at Israel in response to the bombing of their consulate in Syria, Zelensky was not happy. He sounded, basically jealous of Israel for the direct U.S. military intervention, and he has been asking for the U.S. and NATO to shoot down missiles and drones over Ukraine. And he says they're not even talking about it. When he says that when they raise the issue, they change the subject. They don't even want to discuss it. And so he said, quote, "They are scared to even tell us they are working on it. And so far, only Belarus has been seen shooting down Russian drones," end quote. So Belarus said earlier this month that it shot down drones that entered its airspace. And around that same time, NATO members Latvia and Romania said that Russian drones violated their airspace. And now we're seeing these NATO countries talking about shooting down these Russian drones if they get close to the airspace, or shooting them down if they enter their airspace, or even shooting them down, while they're on the way, while they're actually still over Ukraine. But none of them are really talking about what Zelensky wants. He wants them to, shoot down all the Russian missiles and drones to defend Ukraine. But I don't think we're seeing any serious conversation about that within NATO. All right, so the next one here, Biden asked Congress to extend nearly $6 billion in Ukraine aid. So the Biden administration has asked Congress to extend a form of military aid for Ukraine, which will expire if it is not used by September 30th. So the Pentagon said that there is $5.9 billion left for Ukraine spending under the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the U.S. to ship weapons directly from its military stockpiles. Out of the $5.9 billion, $5.8 billion will expire if not extended by the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of this month. The administration wants Congress to include the extension in a continuing resolution that might be passed before September 30th. The Pentagon said, quote, "The Defense Department will continue to provide drawdown packages in the near future and is working with Congress to seek an extension of PDA authorities beyond the end of the fiscal year," end quote. The Biden administration could use a good portion of this $5.8 billion. There's only 2 weeks left, but they say that they're preparing a substantial weapons package for Ukraine. So we'll see. They seem to get what they want when it comes to Ukraine from Congress, although last time it did take much longer than they wanted to. But we'll see if Johnson, the House Speaker, includes this in their plans for this kind of stopgap funding bill that they might pass. It's a lot of money here, almost $6 billion. You could ship a lot of weapons with that. All right, so the next one here, Israel kills 88 Palestinians in Gaza in 3 days. So Israeli forces have killed at least 88 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip over the past 3 days, according to numbers released by Gaza's health ministry. So the ministry said on Sunday that 24 Palestinians were killed and 57 were wounded in the previous 24-hour period, bringing its death toll since October 7th to 41,206 and the number of wounded to 95,337. On Saturday, the ministry said that Israel's assault killed 64 Palestinians and wounded 155 in the previous 48-hour period. So since my last update on this, it's been 88 Palestinians killed, at least, according to the health ministry. And the health ministry said, quote, "Many people are still trapped under the rubble and on the roads as rescuers are unable to reach them," end quote. So the numbers from Gaza's health ministry are considered a low estimate. They don't include Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble, which was previously estimated to be 10,000, but I think it could be much more than that at this point. And it's also unclear how many indirect deaths have been caused by the siege. See the aftermath of this strike in Gaza City. Israel strikes on Gaza over the weekend included a Saturday attack that targeted a home in the Al-Tufa neighborhood in eastern Gaza City, which killed 11, including women and children. Gaza Civil Defense said that out of the 11, 4 children and 3 women were killed. And they hit a family home. I believe they were all family members. All right, so the next one here, the Israeli army says high probability that its strike killed 3 Gaza captives. So this article is from Al Jazeera. After denials for months, the Israeli military says that there is a high probability that its airstrike was responsible for the death of 3 Israeli captives in Gaza in November. So this is almost a year ago now, back in November of 2023. The military on Sunday said that it was unaware the captives were present in a tunnel in the Palestinian territory when they launched the attack on November 10th, 2023. The bodies of the 3 captives were recovered on December 14th, but the cause of death was not determined. The military said, quote, "The findings of the investigation suggest a high probability that the 3 were killed as a byproduct of an Israeli airstrike during the elimination of the Hamas Northern Brigade commander on November 10th, 2023. The military said its investigation revealed that the 3 captives had been held in a tunnel complex from where this Hamas guy operated, so they claim. And the 3 captives were among the 250 people captured by Hamas on October 7th. Around 100 of them are still believed to be in Gaza, but I think out of that, many of them are dead. Either they were brought into Gaza dead, or they were killed by Israeli airstrikes, or they died from some other cause inside Gaza. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. Army is upgrading an Israeli base to make room for new Boeing jets. So this article is from Nick Terse at The Intercept. So the U.S. military has announced the sale of billions of dollars of missiles, bombs, and other weapons to Israel in the past year as the campaign in Gaza grinds on. Now the Department of Defense is also building aircraft facilities in Israel to accommodate American-made refueling tanker planes, according to newly issued public contracting documents reviewed by The Intercept. The project includes new construction and upgrades of existing buildings, including 1 or more hangars, warehouses, and storage facilities at an Israeli military base in the south of Israel, according to Army Corps of Engineers documents. The construction stems from a nearly $1 billion contract awarded to defense giant Boeing in 2022 to provide Israel with 4 KC-46A Pegasus tanker aircraft to be delivered by the end of 2026. And this was the purpose of this purchase was seen as basically Israel increasing its capacity to be able to bomb Iran, because that was always a question, was could their fighter jets make it to Iran and back, because they don't have big refueling, modern refueling planes that they need. I know when they bombed Yemen, they went a pretty long way. But anyway, so this is, again, just another form of U.S. military support, actually building these facilities inside Israel. All right, so the next one here, the Houthis long-range missile hits central Gaza. So the Israeli military said Sunday that a long-range missile fired by Yemen's Houthis struck central Israel. The missile traveled over 1,200 miles from Yemen, demonstrating a significant long-range capability from the Houthis. This is the furthest I've seen them fire a missile. The Israeli military initially said the missile landed in an uninhabited area and that it exploded in the air but was not destroyed by Israel's air defense systems. The missile sparked a fire near the Ben Gurion International Airport. No casualties were reported in the strike, but an Israeli official said that 9 people were injured as they were moving toward shelters after alarms sounded. So Yahya Sarria, the Houthi military spokesman, said that the Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah, fired a new hypersonic missile that traveled to central Israel in less than 12 minutes. So they're saying it's a hypersonic missile. The Israeli military denied that the missile was hypersonic and said that it's currently examining the debris to determine its type and capability. The military insisted that none of its adversaries, including Iran, possess hypersonic missiles. So Netanyahu warned that Yemen would pay a heavy price for the missile attack. Back in July, a Houthi drone hit Tel Aviv, killing 1 civilian, and Israel responded by launching major airstrikes on the Yemeni port of Hodeidah, which killed 7 civilians and caused $20 million worth of damage to fuel infrastructure, set really big fires. And I just mentioned that, this goes to show, you see the U.S. bombing Yemen. I mean, they're still bombing them several times a week. And look what the Houthis are doing. They're still hitting ships. Now they just hit Israel with a missile. And the question is, can they do it again? Can these missiles that they have get through Israel's air defenses consistently? Because then that could be a big problem for Israel. All right, so the next one here, Israel drops leaflets ordering residents to flee southern Lebanon. So this article is from Jason Ditz. Reports out of southern Lebanon are that Israeli forces dropped leaflets over the area ordering civilians to evacuate into the north of Lebanon and to stay there for the duration of the war. There appears to be some controversy surrounding the matter, however, as the IDF reported that the brigade which dropped the leaflets was not authorized to do so, and that there is no evacuation order that exists right now for people in southern Lebanon. So it's kind of strange. The Israeli military dropped these leaflets, but then the IDF said, they weren't authorized to do that. Images of the leaflets were making the rounds on social media, and that they said in Arabic that anyone who is still south of the city of Chaim after 4 p.m. would be considered a terrorist and subject to attack. Israel carries out near-daily attacks on southern Lebanon. So this area, Al-Wazani, is an agricultural center in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military says that the leaflets were dropped by a drone in the area without authorization and that they are carrying out an investigation into the matter. So, if you're living in southern Lebanon and you see this is like, it could just be psychological warfare here from whoever dropped the leaflets. And we know that there are elements in Israel that, want to really ramp things up in Lebanon, go for an invasion, and some of them want to conquer southern Lebanon and take the territory. All right, so the next one here, UN staffer shot dead by Israeli sniper in the occupied West Bank. This one is from The Cradle. An Israeli sniper murdered a Palestinian UN staff member while having coffee on the roof of his home in the occupied West Bank, the UN announced on Friday. So Sufyan Jabr Abed Jawad, who worked as a sanitation worker in the El Farah camp in the West Bank, was shot and killed on the roof of his home by a sniper during an overnight Israeli military operation in the early morning of September 12th, according to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, that is UNRWA. They say he was sitting up there having coffee, and the Israeli military confirmed that they killed him. They claimed that he was hurling explosive devices that posed a threat to the forces operating in the area. Israeli troops killed 9 other Palestinians during their invasion of El Farah camp. So that's pretty, we're seeing some pretty high death tolls in the West Bank in these Israeli raids, and so they're really keeping up the military operations in the West Bank. All right, so the last story here, the U.S. says that 4 ISIS leaders were killed in an Iraq raid last month. So U.S. Central Command claimed on Friday that a raid it conducted with Iraqi forces in western Iraq last month killed 4 ISIS leaders. 7 U.S. troops were wounded in the raid, which was carried out on August 29th. CENTCOM initially said 15 ISIS operatives were killed in the operation, but revised the death toll to 14. So they mentioned some names, claiming that one of them is an ISIS leader responsible for all operations in Iraq, one for Western Iraq, and then they do these other guys have some other responsibilities. And this is again a raid that happened last month, which I covered on the show, and U.S. troops were wounded in this. And you know what? Why I kind of like to focus on this, I mean, it's important to know that there are U.S. troops actively engaged in combat in Iraq in this way, not just sitting at bases that are coming under rocket and drone attack, but also they are still going on raids and doing things like that. Because we just saw Kamala Harris claim that, no, there's no U.S. troops deployed in combat, for the first time this century, which is just a complete lie. Also, President Biden claimed that, I forget when that was, he gave some address and he said, we're not at war. And that same day, the U.S. bombed Yemen. So just completely ridiculous. But one thing about this is that you have Iraq you have the Iraqi military that the U.S. conducted this raid with, saying that they don't need the U.S., that they can handle ISIS remnants by themselves. And yet, the U.S. is still involved in these military operations. And ISIS is kind of the excuse that they use to justify the continued presence in Iraq, the occupation of Syria. And, when really it's about Iran, they want to be able to push back against Iran in both those countries. Iran is an ally of Syria, and Iran has a lot of allies in the Shia factions in Iraq. So that's really what it's about. Especially, it's just something. You have the Iraqi prime minister saying, it was 2 days after this raid, he met with the head of the U.S.-led coalition. I have the quote in here. He said, quote, "The remnants of ISIS no longer pose a threat to the Iraqi state, as they have become isolated groups in hiding in remote areas to avoid capture," end quote. So that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints. One from Michael Clare, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and the Armageddon Agenda. One from Doug Bandow, America should avoid, not fight, future nuclear wars. One from David Gibbs, U.S. provoked 1979 Russian invasion of Afghanistan, parallel to the Ukraine war. One from Thomas Knapp, would-be censors peddle yet another election medal. And the spotlight is from Jacob Hornberger, bizarre verdict in the Tampa free speech trial. And this is a bizarre verdict. This is about the Uhuru movement. These people who are a member of this group and the African People's Socialist Party, who were accused of being, basically they were, the charges that they faced were under FARA, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, claiming that they failed to register as foreign agents. And it's over a very bizarre case. They claim that they did something to influence or try to influence an election in St. Petersburg, Florida, that they had contact in someone with Russia. So they basically accuse them of that, of the failing to register as a foreign agent. But the ruling, the verdict was that they were not guilty of failing to register with the U.S. government, but they were guilty of conspiring to fail to register with the U.S. government as Russian agents. So they were found guilty of conspiracy, and they could face some time for this. And it's just a completely ridiculous verdict, and it is part of this crackdown on speech and just really political views under the guise of, protecting Americans from Russia, from Russian influence and all that. So go check out Jacob's article on it at the Future Freedom Foundation. And that is it. So if you want to support this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com, like, comment, subscribe, share it around. All that stuff helps out. Follow us on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. The antiwar.com Instagram looks really great. So definitely go over there if you don't follow us there. I will be back with some more news tomorrow. Thanks for listening.